Oh no. You know why?
Oh, but we're winning now, 27.
I won't.
We did this in a presentation in Monroe City, and the Cardinals were playing. One of the games that was very back and forth, and we were in a bar, in a room off the bar.
Okay, so now we're gonna jump into the promotion point. We just heard all about the design point. As you guys know, this kind of 4-point approach. Promotion serves a pretty strategic function. I think a lot of times people think that it's just events, and really it's even more simple than that. They think it's just festivals. So this is kind of the standard definition. The goal of the promotion committee is to create retail promotions, program special events, and cultivate a positive image of the business district that attracts residents and visitors downtown to shop, invest, recreate, and socialize. I want to spend a little bit of time going through those 3 different types of events. It's kind of like the core fundamental concept with the promotions committee. Image development activities, special events, and retail and business activities. So this first one, the image development activities, these are any time that you're trying to change negative perceptions or reinforce the positive. Okay, so it's taking those messages head on. It can be done through, one of the big things is apparel. Most of the time, the only thing that you can ever get in a community is directly related to the high school. And if the high school is having a horrible sports season, then pride seems to be pretty low. So making sure that there's apparel that you can get connected with the community, making sure that you have materials that help people to connect with the shopping and dining opportunities in the community. Celebrating progress. We've talked a lot about the facade grant programs. When you go out and you have a building, invest, you need to celebrate that, even so far as to have like a tiny little party, right out front, have a sidewalk, mini concert. And it's almost like you're taking that concept of the old school Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting event, but you're really turning it into both a social interaction and something that generates social media. Give that selfie opportunity at every single one of those. Another big thing, and I will say this is one of the pleasant communities that we were able to spend a whole day in and not hear anybody complain about parking. I think that we all can agree that the goal of Main Street is to create a parking problem, and communities that don't have parking problems have downtown problems. We want more consumers than we have space. Right now you have pretty ample space. You might not necessarily think that from complaints that you hear, but that's because your community is operating in a convenience mindset. So oftentimes the feedback loop is a simple one. A customer walks into a store, complains about how far they had to walk. The merchant doesn't have any way to respond to it, so they just commiserate, and then they complain about, we need parking. That beautiful, historic car dealership across from the church, we need to knock that down and turn it into a parking lot because, that's what brings customers into the community, ample parking. And it's not the way it works. So this is a tactic that we use a lot. This is a parking card. It's just a business card. And we literally just highlight on an overhead photo all the different parking lots that are available in the downtown district. This is Woodland Park, Colorado. More than anything, this simply arms your business community with a response to the complaint. So it helps to kind of dissolve and dilute a little of that. We did branding for Downtown State College, Pennsylvania. They had all these parking garages that no one were parking in. So they instituted a kind of a convenience, a courtesy ticket, the first offense, telling people, hey, you've been here a while. Obviously you like it. Next time you come visit it, why don't you stay in the parking garage so you can stay as long as you want. And then they even followed up with, there's nowhere to park downtown except for our 2,037 parking spaces. So, sometimes you have to hit it with a little bit of aggression. Randy and I were in San Pedro, California, and everybody talked about how unsafe it was, how you wouldn't walk around, how you don't leave your house, blah, 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 yet people were living just like everywhere else. So, sometimes you have to kind of hit some of those misconceptions head on. So the image building is one that we don't necessarily, I think it's a little more touchy-feely. We don't put the emphasis on it that we should, but making sure that you're cultivating pride in the community, because that pride is going to be the foundation to trigger business risk and prospects and people investing in buildings. So making sure the community pride there is a huge way to start. Then we move into special events. These are really our festivals. This is the fall festival. These are the big things. We've got a couple that we were involved in that are really fun. This is Athens, Alabama. So we came up with the Athens Greece Festival, a little play on word there, where it was a celebration of all things fried. So literally a fried food festival. They have toga races. They have people wearing togas eating chicken strips all weekend long. So you can imagine how much fun that is. We heard Randy talk about Lake City. This is their Art Fields event that goes on for 10 days. Can be smaller type events. It's called Buskers in the Berg in Ellensburg, Washington, where they go out and get street performers to go and kind of carry people all through downtown and truly experience what downtown has to offer. There are a couple other special events. Trick or Treat is one. I always like to highlight events like this because a lot of times we make a mistake as to what this event is. If you're doing a community trick or treat where kids are going into the stores and trick or treating, for some reason they think that's a retail promotion, except for the business owners hate it. Like it's not a fun day, and you also don't sell anything that day. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means it's a gift to the community, and you have to make sure you're framing it that way. Anytime you do holiday events, Christmas tree lightings, things like that, they all fall into that special events category. And then that final one is the retail and business activities. These are our promotions that are getting the registers ringing. We came up with one in West Virginia, Fairmont, West Virginia, called Saving Mother's Day. This is a community that's said to be the first Mother's Day celebration happened there. And what we did was on the Saturday before Mother's Day, they had an extended hours campaign in their downtown businesses. They partnered with a local florist. Each store had a different flower. So if you visited the 12 participating stores, you ended up with a free bouquet. And, hopefully also acquired gifts for your wife and or mother. So, we kind of put that as the last minute lifesaver tour. People were saying that this was a fantastic sales day. You always see the wine walks. You have to remember wine walks are interesting events. The purpose there is the shopping that occurs once the wallet is lubricated. I think sometimes there's slightly too much emphasis on, there's too much distraction that goes into it because they'll try to mix in other stuff. I mean, it's wine samples and it's shopping. So keeping it simple and making sure that goes. Same thing with art walks. We see whether we're highlighting different artists, we're seeing plein air painters, we're seeing musicians. Anything that has multiple stops and is trying to promote a customer or potential customer to actually enter in and see the store. So that's what, scavenger hunts, anything like that. In that same vein, restaurant weeks, anything that celebrates those food, the taste that you have. I know, again, you're a small community. You're going to need to be a little creative, but the nice thing is you don't have to, it's not like you have to rally and get a ton of participants because, how many restaurants do you have? So maybe it's just one of those things where I would imagine because of the size of the community, we're going to see a lot of people leave town on the weekends and eat in other places. Go in and do shopping and kind of tag on and eating. Look at the way that life in Concordia is today. Is there a night that's dramatically underserved by the restaurants that are here? Is there a way that we can capture some of that business? So be kind of creative with that. Extended hours campaigns. I know that we had a retailer that just moved out of downtown because they needed more space. You don't have to treat them like a redheaded stepchild. They're still a retailer. So being able to make sure that if you are going through any kind of extended hours campaign, that you're setting expectations from the beginning. These oftentimes are doomed from the beginning, because the proper expectations aren't set. It takes a long time to change consumer behavior. So typically what they'll say is, okay, we're going to do an extended hours campaign. Well, what does that sound like? We're going to pick a first Friday or a third Thursday or a second Saturday because everybody loves alliteration. And then, so that means you're literally doing one day a month, probably 2 hours. We're probably talking a 2-hour commitment a month. And after 3 months, the businesses are like, nobody's coming. 6-hour commitment to reprogram consumer behavior and didn't work. So you got to really manage those. Something else that we'll share with you is just as you start to think about the events that you put on, you guys have done a great job working with the chamber, collectively marketing all the events from the calendar, having that single piece that you handed out at, you said that was at Piccadilly, wasn't it? All that kind of stuff is fantastic. So you've done all the hard stuff. If you've got visual thinkers that are working with the coordination, this is something that I always like to see where I just kind of map out my event schedule by its purpose so we can kind of know. And then what that yellow line is, the yellow line is projected seasonality of your market. I created this one over in Kirksville. Is that right? Kirksville? Yeah, Kirksville. And so it dips down in the summer because all the students are gone. You know, so you can use some planning tools like that, and again, we'll share all that with you. The next thing I want to hit on real quickly is this topic called Main 5. One of the interesting things that we have learned from the Main Street world is every single Main Street organization shares the same 5 audiences. So you're talking to donors, you're talking to owners, you're talking to public, volunteers, and government. And we're really, really bad at teaching you how to communicate. So what does it sound like? It's like, I'm on the Main Street board. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're trying to revitalize downtown. Well, how are you doing that? We're offering a facade grant to help you restore your building. Yeah, and the thing that we miss out on is we don't start where we're supposed to. Always start with the why. Why are we doing this? Not what are we doing, not how are we doing it, but why are we doing this? We're doing it because we believe in the power of this community. We love where we live. We feel connected to where we live, and we want to preserve that place. So a couple examples of this. What are we doing? We're trying to preserve the community. How are we doing that? We're doing that through facade grants. Why are we doing that? Because our buildings only exist here, and we believe that they tell stories that no one else has. What are we doing? We're trying to create vibrancy. How are we doing that? Through events and festivals. Why? Because I went to this event, I fell in love with this community, and now I'm thinking about opening a business. Or I saw that there was a property that was for sale, and I find it to be a reasonable price, so I think I'm going to take a stab at this and invest in downtown. Now, the other thing that we do a bad job of is we tell you all that you need to write vision and mission statements, which are mind-numbing exercises for volunteer boards. And at the end of it, we're left with a document that we're kind of confused what it actually is. I say that a little in jest. It is important to have that kind of thing, but those documents are internal documents. They're governance. They're helping us to make sure we're on track. So what I've done is I've created this little Main Street Mad Lib that you can go through and kind of write your own elevator speech. Why are you involved in this organization? And why do you believe in the community? So giving every single board member that opportunity. The exact same thing works with chamber as well. You know, being able to say, we don't need you all to say the exact same thing. I'd rather you tell other people why you're involved and why you choose to be a part of this. And then again, just like we showed with the event schedule, we're going to show you some examples on kind of mapping out your communication over the year, just to make sure that it's strategic and well thought out. Are you communicating to the people you need to be? How often do you actually go and talk to city government? How often do you talk to council? How often do you go out and talk to other community groups who might be volunteers for your events and make your life a little easier? So again, this is just all stuff to think about. I'm a big believer that if you feel like this makes your job harder than easier, then you leave it. leave it right on the table. But sometimes every now and then something like this it's the key to say, I never thought about it that way, and that'll help us be more efficient. This is that same chart just organized by audience instead of by medium. Always remember, order matters and start with why. Put emotions before data. The sad thing is in 2019, when you lead with facts, you stimulate the skeptical mind. It used to be that you could give data and people would believe it. Strangely, they don't believe it anymore. It's all fake news, you know? You've got to make that emotional connection before people will receive the information that you want to share. And one of my favorite quotes, no one ever marched on Washington because of a pie chart. Just remember what you're really doing here is you're leading a movement, a movement that's changing a trend and refocusing on revitalization in the community. And you got to lead through inspiration. You don't have to lead through kind of the boring numbers. And then we're coming around the bend with branding. This is my thing that I really love, telling the story. It is rare that I get to come into a community like this that has gone through a process 33 years ago and is still using that same thing. And believe it or not, I mean, would I have landed on what you have? Probably not today, but it's simple. It still works. That's worthy of significant credit. And whenever you walk into a community that has a toolbox that they've used as long as you have, there's no reason to change it. In fact, you're probably going to trigger more complaint than you are excitement. But you can always bring new and fresh life into an idea that's been around. One of my favorites brands that's out there is the Virginia's for Lovers campaign, which is launched in 1969, believe it or not. So it is the longest standing state tourism campaign in the country. But every couple of years, they introduce new spins on it to keep it fresh and breathe more life into it. So I like to start talking about branding with the simple question, why do we brand? It's a buzzword that's, only about 25 years old or so. But I illustrate it with this idea of how we would celebrate a kid's birthday. So in the 1940s, you'd go to the local grocer and buy flour and eggs and stuff and spend about 50 cents and go home and make a cake. In the 60s, you'd go buy that box mix. By the 80s, you'd go to the chain grocery store and get the cheesy quarter sheet cake. And now in 2018, 2019, we're renting Fortnite trailers for $500. And any of you have Fortnite age children, I read a horrible story. So they just over the weekend,
They had some downtime.
well, and it was all planned on their end, but the game was gone for almost 2 days. And it was a bit of a publicity stunt on their end. But I read a comment from a man who had rented a Fortnite trailer for his son's birthday. The birthday started at 2 p.m. on Sunday at the exact moment when the game went down. So literally no one was able to play, and he was devastated. I can.
Life or death at our house, but it was like, what the heck? What's going on?
What do I do now? Like there was a really sad, anxiety and depression. But what those really illustrate for us is that transition from this raw material into product, service, and now experience economy. And being in the core of that experience economy is the thing that has really led us to talk about it brand. Before, it didn't really matter. The consumer wasn't concerned about brand. It's that evolution of our economy that really is fueling that. So what I always say is branding is the discovery and preservation of a community's personality. When a community goes through a branding process, it's not creating something. It's not the formulation of a theme. It is the discovery of a pre-existing personality and then the creation of tools to preserve that personality. And if you explain it that way, then oftentimes what you find is that will ease the fears of the locals who do not want you to do anything different. Your goal is to create brand equity. Brand equity means your identity and your personality has value. So I always use this illustration. So you've got this, the Mercedes SUV, all the standard features. How much does this car cost if you were guessing?
70.
Right, 70, 80. You can, a lot of times when people hear Mercedes, like I know my brother's kind of a car guy, and like when you say Mercedes, he's like, I can smell the Corinthian leather. You know, it's like, okay, I get it. But when you find out that this car is actually a Kia, is it still worth $70,000? No. And why is that? Well, when you pull up to the stoplight and you're driving a Mercedes, people think a certain thing. And when you're driving a Kia, they think different. Not good or bad, just different. Well, that same value can work to our advantage. It's the kind of thing that draws customers in. It cultivates loyalty, and it creates the willingness to invest in this place. So I've been doing this work for almost 20 years, and in doing that, I have discovered that you always have to have rules if you want to be an expert. So here are my 5 rules to make sure that you don't make mistakes with the branding. Rule number 1 is called the khaki rule, and you always need to avoid design by committee. Design by committee is very bad. First of all, it is not efficient. Second of all, it's mind-numbing to the participants. Third of all, it always results in a mediocre consensus response. People do design by committee because they feel like they need to have everyone's input. And that is true. Input is good, but input comes at the front end of the process, not the back end of the process. So the example I like to share is if we were to all sit around this table and come up with one and only one outfit that we would all wear for the rest of our lives, we would end up in khaki pants. You know, we'd probably have a blue shirt and we'd look like we worked at Best Buy. So you want to avoid thinking that consensus is the same thing that's going to help you stick out from the crowd. This is a system that we put together for Kittitas County, Washington. Kittitas County is just east of Snoqualmie Pass. It's the first place where you actually get to see the sun as you leave Seattle. Everybody hears Seattle and thinks rain and gray, and this is where the color of nature reemerges. So we kind of did this really simple, bold kind of look and feel for them, and then the committee got a hold of it. So the first question was, well, do people know where Kittitas County is? And maybe what we need to do is we need to have a logo that's a map of the state. And then, well, we are a county, so we need to make sure that we name every single community in our county. And then, it just got worse and worse and worse with each of their iterations. And finally, one of the committee members was like, I'd just like us all to stop for a second and look at how absolutely horrible that looks. And then they went back to this. So being very, very mindful of the role of input is really important in any process you do. Whether it's a brand design, whether it's a sign design, being able to go through and listen and then turn it into a strategic response. Rule number 2 is say no to design competitions. There's a reason why MoDOT doesn't have design competitions for interstate bridges. Believe it or not, these graphic and visual tools are important. And we need to trust them to be strategic and expandable. I've got some great examples to share with you. This is from a city in India. This is a logo that came out of a design competition. They definitely win points for thoroughness. But other than that, it's pretty doggone bad. Very, very literal. This is a logo that came out of a design competition in Germany. It's kind of a odd adaptation of E.T. melting, I think. Who knows what that is? But then the other thing that we always fight against with communities is the tendency for people to try to be cute. They think that cute sells. So La Crosse, Kansas, the barbed wire capital of the world. It's a pretty interesting one to go with. I use this to kind of illustrate that point that saying what no one else can say and saying what no one else wants to say are two very different things. Gas, Kansas. Don't pass gas. Stop and enjoy it.
These are not made up.
These are not made up. I wish they were. Oh, this next one's worse. Hooker, Oklahoma. It's a location, not a vocation. Now, you would think that this was a joke, but literally their local sports teams are the Horny Toads. And their senior center sells once a hooker, always a hooker t-shirts. Right? So, right. I mean, I'd buy the shirt, but still, you don't want your whole community wrapped around that. And then this is my final example. This is from Colorado. Where the geese fly and the bulls cry. I had no clue what that meant. And then we found out that they were the home of Bruce's Bar, home of Rocky Mountain Oysters. Literally, this community's identity is all wrapped around bull testicles. It doesn't make sense. Like, why would you do that? So, we did hear that Missouri does have a testicle festival.
There's a community in Missouri.
Yeah.
So,
By Eldon, I believe.
oh man.
It's close to it.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Of course it is.
I know people that go there.
Oh, wow. Rule 3 is the seal rule. I was very, very excited here to see, obviously, the city and Betterment in 1986, I think we said, led the effort to create a new logo and probably replaced a more historic seal. Seals are important graphic tools in the life of communities, but they're not marketing tools. Believe it or not, I wish that this was a joke seal. This is the actual seal of Whitesboro, New York. They swear that the Indian and the settler are engaging in a fun game of Indian wrestling. There was a very, I think, simple question about, hey, does anybody think that maybe this isn't culturally sensitive? And the village got together and decided that they wanted to keep it exactly like it was. So another reason you don't always ask the public for their opinion. But seals notoriously are, they kind of become the design garbage disposal at times. This is Salisbury, Maryland, and literally they have tomatoes, pumpkins, haystacks, cucumbers, apples, strawberries, like everything.
Like everybody.
Everything. And my favorite part is they're downtown. It's not a giant place. They have 2- and 3-story buildings in their downtown. So this top right corner is supposed to be a building lined street. Those are like 11-story buildings. And the mayor there, who is one of the best mayors in the country, a guy named Jake Day, referred to that as the Death Star Trench. So you do win points for Star Wars references. But my favorite one comes from Randy and I's home state of South Carolina. This is St. Stephen, South Carolina. Again, this is designed by committee in action. You can tell 6 people sat around this table and each one got to come up with a word. And I mean, it's like, okay, so you've got clip art Christmas trees as industry, and then look at how much fun recreation appears to be. But the part that blows my mind is they're such a patriotic community that they included the head and legs of an American eagle. So that's kind of a weird one. Rule 4, the screwdriver rule. You must have the right tool for the job. This is one of the biggest mistakes that communities make. And it's a rule. You have to understand the rule before you break the rule. And I'm probably going to break my own rule here in Concordia because you're such a small community. But we really look to colleges and universities for this wisdom. They have an academic brand and then they have an athletic brand. And there's similarities between them, but there's also just enough separation. If your city government logo is the only thing you have to represent the community when the elected officials do something that the community doesn't like, there's now a separation between supporting the place you live. So we like to introduce this idea of having a destination brand and an organization brand, where in that organization brand category, you have everything from your chamber logos to your city government logos to your Main Street logos. And then in this destination brand, you have components that are truly shared by all. And that's why we ask the questions about the trademark on the Hearts in Harmony and that logo, because it has been around so long that it is my belief that it deserves to be owned by the community. The fact that you have been able to keep something and use it that long, it has earned its place as being everyone's. So we'll dig into that and share a little bit more. And I was so pleased to not have to apply this to you, because this is the third community in Missouri that we've worked on this trail, and both of them before you used their logos as maps. So we were in Kirksville, and this is their city logo. And then we went to Monroe City and their city logo. Well, those look really similar. Like, yeah, it does look like the same spot. So, one of the big things that we always want to remind you of is making sure you have a robust brand toolbox. I'm going to share suggestions on this with you tomorrow morning. But in that toolbox, having consistent colors. And consistent colors is more than just saying red. It's about actually defining that red and having the same red. It's about using typeface for continuity. It's about having graphics that feel like they go together, and then having a message that ties you all together. I want to give you a couple quick examples, and we'll get you out of here. Randy showed you a bunch and talked to you a bunch about Beaufort, so I just wanted to share Beaufort with you real quick. These are some of the logos that we had going into the community. There are actually some really, really good logos, but absolutely no continuity whatsoever. The Main Street organization there did a lot of events. And again, though, no continuity between their own events. So graphically, they're not even making it easy for participants to know what it is that they do. And I will say, though, they do get major props for having both a jogging shrimp and a saxophone playing crab. So that's the first time there. You always have to think about the challenges that your community has and your community's identity has. Beaufort, South Carolina has a unique situation because a couple hours up the road is Beaufort, North Carolina. Now, they pronounce it Beaufort, but it's spelled exactly the same, which is wrong. So, you have to be real considerate. And obviously, if you've got two places that are taking this Beaufort name to the market in a similar geography, you have to be concerned about what they look like. Obviously, with Concordia, you've got Concordia, Kansas, you've got Concordia University. There are things out there that are kind of sharing your name. So in Beaufort, we actually had 3 different messages that we wanted to kind of solidify for them. One was this, what we called a moniker. It was Queen of the Sea Islands. This was a phrase that had been around for over 100 years. It wasn't necessarily doing a whole lot strategically, but it had history on its side. So we wanted to make sure that we could kind of frame that and say, you don't ever get rid of this, but it can't be your only tool. Then we introduced what we called a positioning statement, and it was established before Savannah, discovered before Charleston. So Beaufort exists in this perfect corridor between these two historic communities that kind of own that kind of southeast coast history, like that's their brand. So what we did is we positioned them as having a story of prominence in comparison to both of those. And then the final message was this very simple idea of historic retreat. The reason why Beaufort is as preserved as it is because as Sherman came through in the Civil War, the residents heard he was coming, and as they said, they buried the silver and ran. So Sherman came into an absolutely beautiful and completely abandoned town, and instead of burning it to the ground, he decided to set up headquarters there and live out of the community, thus preserving it. So being able to have those different adaptations, being able to talk about the fact that you have this downtown, this historic background. We went and rebranded all the events using the colors and the typeface so they all feel connected to one another. And then we just introduced a series of messaging. By the time Savannah was founded, we were already old enough to drink. They turned these into T-shirts. They actually filmed quite a few of the scenes of Forrest Gump right there in Beaufort. And while Tom Hanks was there, he fell in love with this local chocolate shop called the Chocolate Tree. So when they got to Savannah to film the Life as a Box of Chocolate scene on one of the squares there in Savannah, originally they just had a box of Whitman samplers. Well, Tom Hanks made somebody drive all the way back to Beaufort, get a box of chocolates from the chocolate tree. So in that movie, the chocolates he's eating are from the chocolate tree. So being able to tell those stories and just make connections that people have.
And the chocolate tree was one of the recipients of the awning facade component grant.
And then one other quick one. I wanted to put this one in here because this is Grayling, Michigan. This is a community of only 1,800 people, so even smaller than you all. They had a city logo that was affectionately known as the canoeing Daffy Duck. It was supposed to be an Indian, but once you see those feathers look like a bill, you can't really unsee that. Grayling is actually named after a native fish that inhabits the waters there, and it's also the starting point of something called the Canoe Marathon. It's a 100-mile canoe race across Michigan. Really big deal. So we started by creating a new brand for the city as a whole, introducing this tagline of naturally colorful, creating this stylized G with the grayling fish with its unique dorsal fin, and bringing in the water and the canoe, giving them that community-wide version, but then replacing the Daffy Duck with, you still got your canoeists, but now you've got a little bit more subdued city logo, introducing a logo for the downtown, Michigan's most colorful river town, and kind of bringing in that simple consistency of the typeface, giving them the tools that they need to tell that story, but then also expanding it out to the Main Street organization, and then using these colors to help tell the 4-point approach and talk about the organization, show it professionally, what an annual report might look like, standardizing open and closed signs, and then bringing all those events that they have. I always love to talk about this one because they have one of the coolest events I've ever seen on downtown. They close a section of their main street, they build a pool above ground, and they put a canoe in it. And they literally have, it's during March Madness, they have a bracket of 64 paddlers get in the canoe facing each other, and essentially it's like tug of war. Who can push the canoe over the line? So they focus, and during their downtime, and the spectators will come in and watch, and then they'll walk around downtown. It's a great event. Cash registers ring. People love it. And then they just got approved paddle putt-putt. So they're building micro putt-putt, and you have to do it with a boat paddle instead of a putter. And so that'll be a cool event for them. And then my two favorites, Buena Vista, Virginia. They pronounce things wrong in Virginia to tell whether you're a Yankee. So to everyone else, this is Buena Vista, but there it's Buena Vista. In the world of red coats and tri-corner hats, this is a 1800s industrial planned community. This is blue collar, has always been blue collar. Even their name means good views. Not great views, not spectacular views, just, it's like the tagline should be, we're all right, you know? So we just wanted to give them this opportunity, see themselves in a nice, clean way. But the thing that was interesting there was they had this sign. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but in the bottom corner it says 1971. This sign has been up for 40 some odd years. Welcome to Buena Vista, 6,002 happy citizens and 3 old grouches. You Google the word grouch, and this sign shows up on the first page of results. So we decided to take those 3 old grouches and turn them into the ambassadors for the community. So we would literally play up this idea of, people being a little rough around the edges. And it was really kind of fun to see how they took this. What they started to do was every year they selected 3 members of the community to be named the old grouches. And then at the Christmas parade, they would mic them up on the grandstand, and they would complain about every float that came by. So it was really fantastic. This idea, you always know it's good when people copy you. So we found the Fort Laramie, 250 good people and 6 sore heads. So, a good idea gets taken, that's for sure. And then finally, Travelers Rest, South Carolina. This is one that I did almost probably 15 years ago, and it is just going strong. Travelers Rest is about 10 minutes from where I grew up, and it's right at the foothills of the mountains. It's where the drovers used to come through the mountain range to bring their livestock to sell into the Greenville market. And they were kind of mountain folk, I think it's fair to say. And nobody calls it Traveler's Rest. They all call it TR. And since they're kind of hicks, they call it TR. You can go to TR. And we kind of told them, we're like, look, you don't have enough resources to make people not call you TR. But the thing you can do is make TR a really positive thing. So they also served as this kind of base camp to all these really great outdoor amenities of the mountains. So we started by creating a logo that was inspired by an element off the periodic. Right. They stole it from us. Inspired off the periodic table, this idea of get in your element. And then we launched the whole campaign with It Starts with TR, and we used words like tradition, tranquil, travel, trails, trip, trek, trees, transported, trapped. So like they had all this stuff that they could kind of do. And what was really cool about it was in this presentation, we were sharing all this, and they had a local Ford dealer. And he said, trucks start with TR. And everybody kind of laughed. But after the meeting, like all these business owners were like clustered up in little groups talking about what their TR would be. And that's been one of the coolest things is it's not about coming up with some sort of big creative idea. It's about the expandability. It's about simplicity that allows people to connect. So, when I sat there yesterday and I was like, so Hearts in Harmony, what's that from? And then come to find out, well, that's what you are. Like literally your name in Latin is of one heart. Like it is the harmony of one heart. That's pretty amazing. So I'm excited to kind of take some of those and share those with you tomorrow. But hopefully that helps to kind of understand a little bit about what the promotion committee is focused on, the strategic roles of events, the need to be very planned in your communication and how you communicate with those audiences, and then making sure that you're connecting the dots with all your branding and marketing.